Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Today we'll be traveling to the ocean's bottom, to the sea's bottom, because we will be presenting a game about scuba diving, about treasure hunting at the bottom of the sea. This will be the review of a game published in 2014 by Oink Games, which is called Deep Sea Adventure. This is a game for 2 to 6 players, although the first edition said that this is a game for 3 to 6 players, but it is absolutely possible to be also played in a group of 2. This is a game for players aged 8 or higher, but even younger players should be able to play this game because this is a very low entry game. This is a game in which you will have some decisions to make, but at the same time it is very easy to learn. The time of play, extremely pleasant. It is somewhere around 30 minutes. So this is not a war game, this is a filler game, a Euro game, a family game, but I like it very much and I decided to show it on our channel and to tell you in a few words why I believe this is one of the best filler games published during the recent years. So firstly, let's take a look at how the elements of Deep Sea Adventure look, then I'll briefly explain how the game works, and at the end I'll tell you what I think about this game, what I think are its strong but also the weaker points. Here is Deep Sea Adventure prepared to play a new game. Firstly, let's take a look at all the elements that we will be using during the game. The first element is a submarine board from which our divers, our explorers, will be trying to descend under the sea surface in order to recover the treasure which are at the sea's bed. But this is also the place where we will be tracking the air reserve, because in this game each and every explorer will be using a common air reserve, and the amount of oxygen which is left is tracked on the submarine thanks to this small marker. The second element that we will be using are those explorer pieces. Each player will receive one of such meeples. As you can see, they will be used in order to track where our diver is currently located. Each diver can be either on the submarine or somewhere diving, searching for treasure. We will be using 4 different chips which will represent treasure tokens. Those tokens, those chips, are of 4 different forms with a different number of white dots and of different colors. The ones which are the closest to the submarine are the ones which will grant you the least number of points, for instance even 0. Whereas those which are the farthest from the submarine will give you a huge boost of points if you manage to take them and bring them back to the submarine, because in Deep Sea Adventure, you will be trying to gather the biggest possible number of points. Those points are granted for treasures which are firstly found and then brought back to the submarine. So in order to score points, you have to not only take those chips, but also bring them back to the submarine. You will be also using blank tokens, which will be used during the game when replacing those chips when you decide to take any of them. Finally, we will be using 2 6-sided die, but those are in fact dice which have only 3 results: 2 1s, 2 2s and 2 3s. Now, how a game of Deep Sea Adventure looks. As I said, the objective of each player will be to acquire the maximum possible number of points. Those points are calculated after each of the 3 rounds that we will play. During each round, the players will try to descend, take some chips and bring them back to the submarine before the oxygen on the submarine runs out. So how a turn of Deep Sea Adventure looks. Firstly, when you are somewhere on this track, we'll start with such an example, you have to reduce the common air reserve by the number of chips that you are currently holding during this round. So imagine that during one of the earlier turns, I already acquired one of those chips and I have one of them before my turn starts. The first thing that I should do is to reduce the common air reserve by the number of chips, in this case by 1. The second thing that I should do during each round is to decide whether I want to continue moving farther from the submarine or if I want to get back. This decision of getting back to the submarine is a decision which you can take only once during the game. You cannot change your decision, so you cannot go back and decide to go once again farther from the submarine. You cannot also go back to the submarine and descend once more during one and single round. So you have to decide at that point if you want to continue moving, risking that you might get suffocated if the common air reserve is depleted, or if you want to get back and to secure your points that you already acquired during this turn. After this decision, you roll the dice. You sum the results, then you subtract from the result the number of chips that you are currently holding. So in this case, my speed would be 3. And then I move my explorer the number of spaces indicated by the final result. If I happen to move through a space where another explorer is located, I can jump through it 1, 2, 3 without counting the space where this explorer is located. So this is a way to move more quickly. At the end of my movement, I can do nothing, or I can also decide to pick up the treasure chip on which I ended my movement. I can look at it without showing it to my opponents and place it into my reserve. After taking such a chip, I replace it with a blank token. I may also, if I end my movement on a blank space, replace it by one of the chips that I already had acquired during this round. Now you might wonder, why should I do this? Well, because if you have, for instance, 2 chips and you want desperately to get back to the submarine because the oxygen reserve is really low, you might want to increase your chances by leaving some less valuable tokens in order to increase your speed, because I explain once more, your final speed is the sum of the dice minus the number of tokens that you hold. So putting one of those tokens back to the tiles means that you receive a +1 speed. After each player returns to the submarine, the round ends, or if the common reserve of air runs out, the player whose turn it is can finish his turn, but then each player who didn't manage to return to the submarine automatically fails and suffocates. They score 0 points, whereas all the players who managed to return to the submarine can unveil the tokens, and this is their score at the end of this round. They can add those chips to the tokens which they already acquired during the previous rounds. At the end of each round, we remove the blank spots, so we shorten the line, and at the same time we enable the explorers to reach more easily the most valuable tiles. But if any of the divers didn't manage to return to the submarine, we take his tokens which he acquired during this round and we place them in stacks of 3 at the end of the file of the line.
Those stacks can be taken when diving as a single chip, so you can grab them, and then when moving you can reduce your final score only by 1. So it's pretty interesting to grab those stacks, because they will grant you the total number of points that they consist of, but they are much more easy to take. The problem is they are always at the end of the file, so you have to get down up to the end of all this long file. The game is played in 3 rounds, so after finishing the 3rd round, we compare the number of victory points acquired by each player. It's the player who has the higher total who wins. In case of a tie, it's the player with the most high-level runes chips who is declared the winner. If there happens to be a draw also in this sector, the game ends in a draw. And this is pretty it all when it concerns the rules of deep sea adventure. Now I'd like to pass to a conclusion and tell you briefly what I think about this game, what I think are its strong but also the weaker points.
This is not the first time that I am reviewing Deep Sea Adventure. While I was part of the editorial team of Board Times, one of the major Polish board gaming blogs, I reviewed this game, and in a scale to 5, I rated this game a 5. So I thought that at the time, this was such a good game, such a good filler game, that I gave it the highest possible rate. Now, after a few years, when I still have this game in my collection, I decided to revisit it and to present a new review on our channel. And I must say that even though many years have passed, this is still a very good game and I enjoy it a lot. As I said, it is still part of my collection and it is regularly played. When I am looking for a filler game, Deep Sea Adventure comes to my mind almost instantly. What I like in this title is, firstly, the fact that this is a very high quality components game. It is very pretty, it is very elegant. This is a high standard production by Oink games. I like the font used on the tiles, I like the artwork, I like those small miniatures, I love this submarine. I think that the rulebook is very well written. So when just looking at this game, you see that this is a very high quality components game. It's extremely elegant and at the same time extremely pleasant to play, extremely pleasant to look at. Secondly, this is an extremely easy game. It is a game with an extremely low entry level. You can easily explain this game even to non-gamers in 3 to 5 minutes and play a game in 25 or 30 minutes and then play a new one. So this is a very fast game, a very dynamic game, a game in which, although it is very easy to explain, very easy to learn, you will still have some valid, so very important decisions to make, because this is all about pushing your luck. This is a classical push your luck game. And during the game, the decision when to go back to the submarine will be the most important one that you will be taking. Apart from that, it's dice rolling, it's also deciding when to take those treasure tiles, or sometimes, more rarely, when to leave some tiles apart. Sometimes you will decide not to return to the submarine, you will just go to the bottom of the sea trying to kill your opponents at the same time, because what I extremely like in this game is this common oxygen mechanism. It is a thing that influences the fact that you have to cooperate with players during the game. You will form very brief coalitions with other players. You will sometimes form those coalitions in order to go deeper and to pick up more valuable treasures, but sometimes you'll also form coalitions in order to drown everyone, in order to use this oxygen reserve, in order to forbid other players to return to the submarine. So this is a game in which you will be discussing a lot of things, you will be forming brief coalitions with different players each time. This is a game with full of emotions, with full of laughter. I like it very much. What I like also is the fact that this is a game which works extremely well both when played by 2 players, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. It scales extremely well, and at the same time the time of play isn't much longer when playing in a bigger group. The reason is that you have this common reserve of oxygen, which is the same during each game. You do not have a bigger oxygen reserve when playing, for instance, in a group of 5 players. You still have the same reserve. So this moment of returning to your submarine will be coming very much faster when playing with more players, but the game still is very entertaining and still very interesting. You have some smaller variants because you can play when playing with 2 players using controlling, for instance, 3 scuba divers. You can also decide to use two divers when playing 3 players games. So you still have some options to make this game different than in this classical mode when you just control 1 diver. What I like is, as I said earlier, this push your luck element, which requires making some decisions, sometimes forming those coalitions and sometimes even breaking those coalitions at the least expected time for your opponents. So this is a game which really shines when you want to use it as a filler, which really shines when introducing board gaming to other players or we're looking for something extremely easy but at the same time full of interesting moments, full of laughter. So what I think are the weaker points of this game? Firstly, I'd say that this push your luck element is at the same time the core mechanic in this game, but at the same time it's the weakest point, because in push your luck games, when this luck factor is too high, it sometimes makes you feel that the game is too random. And in Deep Sea Adventure, although the moment when you decide to return is the most important one, and here it's up to you when to make this decision, dice rolling makes sometimes this decision irrelevant, because you can make a correct decision when deciding to go back, calculate it even, and then have a string of bad die rolls, because it's possible, for instance, to stick just 1 spot in front of the submarine and roll two consecutive times 2 ones and stay put, finally drown, and not to score any points. So this is possible and it happens in this game, but at the same time it is such a short game, such a pleasant one, that even in face of such a situation you won't have the feeling that this is a thing that totally ruined your playing experience. You just replay another game and you have fun, because at the end those statistical things really tend to become equal, and even if you have a string of bad die rolls, then ultimately you'll have a string of good ones. So this is such a short game that this push your luck element and this randomness element concerning dice roll will not be a major impact which will influence your final gaming experience. The second thing is that this game is really hard to find and it is quite expensive. I said at the beginning of this conclusion that this game is a high standard quality design, and those components, elegant components, are at the same time in relation to the price, because it is a game which has really not a lot of components in a small pretty box, but when compared to other games which represent the same maybe not the same standard, but which have the same amount of components, you see that the price of this game is much higher. At the same time, it is quite difficult to find, because at the time that I am presenting this review, we do not have many other companies which decided to publish this game apart from Oink games. We have some of them, but this doesn't mean that the game is very easy to find. So when looking for copies of this game on the second market, for instance in Poland, it's very rarely seen, and even if, as I said earlier, the price is quite high. But having said that, if you happen to find a copy of Deep Sea Adventure, I believe that you should grab it, because it is an extremely entertaining game, an extremely interesting game, in which the mechanic and the theme of the game, this subject, this topic of treasure hunting, of being a diver, are so well linked together that you have this immersion during the game, and at the same time you have full of interesting decisions, you have full of interesting situations. This is a very interesting, very good filler. I strongly recommend you try it, and if you have the possibility, grab a copy. This was the review of Deep Sea Adventure by Oink Games. I invite you to take a look at also our other videos in English. We have reviews and unboxings on our channel. Take also a look at our Facebook and Instagram accounts. And if you want to support our channel, you can become our patron, taking a look at the Patronite account. The description of this movie will have a link towards our Patronite account. I wish you a terrific day, and see you next time.